Hi, good morning from Hong Kong. I would like to show you how to open up your lymph nodes. Now, I am a physical therapist with 30 years experience, and I'm also trained in medical lymphatic drainage. So I actually work with people who have some serious health issues. And so a lot of the times you go on the internet and they tell you to dry brush to the heart. And this is not accurate. It's the deep lymph system, which is being confused with the superficial lymph system. Now, the deep lymph system actually has a pump. So when we run and we're breathing really hard, certain yoga poses, the breath work, all of these things help pump the deep lymph system, which primarily is in the gut, and it goes towards the heart. So I think the confusion is that people think you need to brush towards your heart, but that is actually, when you're brushing, you're treating the superficial lymph system. Now, that system does not have a pump. And so we need to actually stimulate it because sometimes it can get really blocked. So the main areas of drainage before you start dry brushing is right behind the collarbone. So usually what I like to do is to look down so I can curl my fingers right behind the collarbone, and I pump down and towards the midline of my body 10 times. Now, when you're doing this, you should actually be naked. No clothes, no elastic on the body. And because if you've got any elastic, I've got elastic on, if I'm draining here, because of the elastic here and here, I can't actually help to drain my lower extremities. So the elastic really inhibits the flow of the lymphatic system. And a great example of that is if you've ever worn a bra and it's really smooth back here, and then at the end of the day, you look at your back and you see a bulge underneath your bra strap, that's because your lymphatic system actually can't get through that elastic. And I think this is one of the reasons why there's a lot of belief around ill-fitting bras causing sluggish lymph system, but also contributing to breast health. Okay, so after you've drained the collarbone, you want to drain the armpit. Now, the collarbone, going back to the collarbone, that actually drains all the neck and the face. So the collarbone also, if we look at the breast and we broke it up into quadrants, this quadrant drains behind the collarbone. The 3 quadrants here of the breast drain in the armpit. So when we drain the armpit, we're not just draining fluid from the arms, we're also helping our breast health. The other area it drains is, okay, my belly button's right there. If I draw a line all the way around, everything above the belly button drains in the armpit. So this is how we drain the armpit. You actually just put a fist in your armpit and you massage it this way or this way. It doesn't matter. But just getting in there and just 10 of those is so amazing for the lymph system. And like I said, the superficial lymph system doesn't have a pump. So if we have any sluggishness in our arms, whether they're really feeling big right down here, or maybe, you know, like this sort of like fluid retention that we get through here, this is a great way to start draining it. And lymph nodes are basically cleaning stations. And so by stimulating them and squeezing them, we're making the white blood cells in the immune system work faster. So this is how you do the drainage of the armpit. So now the next area that we're going to drain are the legs and below the belly button. So like that line right here, which separates the upper trunk from the lower trunk, and how we drain is the lymph nodes right here, right in that natural crease of the leg, or where your panty line is. And what I like to do is I maybe bend my leg just a little bit. I get my fingertips in there. It's hard to do if you've got really long nails, but I'm a physio, so I keep my nails short. And I just go right in that crease and I push actually in the direction of my belly button. So it's kind of like at an angle because this crease is at an angle. So I do that 10 times. 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And this is a really good time to address scar tissue because I see a lot of women who get a lot of fluid retention after they've had a baby. And they might think, oh, it's my baby, but because there's such a high percentage of cesareans, I need to explain to you what scar tissue does. And a cesarean scar is the perfect example of what happens. So when they make an incision here, the fluid from the belly button down, remember this area has to go down and drain. When you've got a scar here, the fluid tries to drain, but when it hits the scar, it backs up. And the tendency is for it to back up here. So all of a sudden the hips start putting on some bulk, the bum as well. So what we want to do is you have to see somebody who's very good with releasing scar tissue. You really need to get it broken up. You have to wait till 4 months after surgery because you need to let that scar tissue repair itself. And that takes 4 months. And then you can start seeing somebody who's very knowledgeable in breaking up the adhesions. So I have a clinic in Hong Kong called the Body Group. We have a couple trained lymphatic drainage therapists. We also work with scar tissue, and we also have some very good therapists who work on the abdomen who know how to break up scar tissue. Now, the abdomen's not the only place we get scar tissue. It's very common. But also too, like there's a lot of scar tissue around breast sometimes. So maybe you may have had a biopsy or something removed like lymph nodes, anything like that. So this is really going to affect the drainage of the lymphatic system, which is affecting your immune system. So breaking up scar tissue is really important anywhere in the body if you want to make this more efficient, because let me explain something about scar tissue. Our tissue normally is in a linear pattern, and when we have an injury or we have a surgery and they cut through that tissue, the pattern goes from this, and scar tissue now does this. Scar tissue is not concerned about the pattern. It just makes this haphazard sort of patch, so to speak, like that. So let's say, for example, I had a cesarean. If over time, what will happen is that scar will start to get tight and it starts pulling on the fascia. Now, fascia is connective tissue. It surrounds every single cell of our body. It's what holds us together. It's fibrous. It doesn't give. I kind of think of it like parachute material. So when you've cut through there, now the fascia and everything starts to get tight and it pulls, pulls, pulls. So from down here, it's pulling up. From up here, it pulls down. The older the scar tissue, the more areas of your body are going to be affected. And I recently read an interesting article which I thought was brilliant because it listed all the common conditions that a person might have that makes them more prone to cancer. And one of those was scar tissue. And I thought, wow, I'm so glad to see that, because scar tissue chokes off the blood supply, the nutrient supply to any area. And it also starts to limit range of motion. So it can be very debilitating, but nobody addresses this. I'm not sure why. I think it's because it doesn't happen until later, so nobody links these things to scar tissue. But going back to the cesarean scar, we're not talking about just a superficial scar. We're talking about layers of tissue that get moved around, pushed aside, cut. So you also have that cut on the uterus. So it's also affecting the uterus. It can affect the way the uterus has its flexibility. It can also, when an organ loses its normal rhythm, which it will do when you have made an incision into it, it can now affect the bladder, which is right on top of it. The other areas is that the scar tissue spreads, it starts to pull on the intestine. And when it pulls on the intestine or wraps around the intestine, it can cause blockages, which can cause constipation, becomes very sluggish. And so breaking up the adhesions and really working on that, all the movement around the intestines in a safe way with somebody who's knowledgeable is very important. So I'm going to just show you now, those are the main areas. Those 6 areas are the main areas that you need to work with in the lymphatic system, but I'm just going to show you a couple that I think are really helpful. So if you get swelling in your legs, like when you're on the plane, if you open up all your lymph nodes like I showed you, 10 times, again with no clothes on, no elastic on the body, there's a really great way to help the legs. And so what you can do is you take your fingers like this, go behind the knee, and you push up like this 10 times. And then also around the ankle, we've got our ankle bones on both sides. So what you want to do is you curl your fingers around the ankle bone, and this is a good balance exercise. You're going to sort of curl around that ankle bone, and then go up to the behind the knee again, and then drain in the groin again. And before you get on a flight, if you do that, your ankles are going to be significantly less swollen. It is also helpful to try to wear clothing that's a little bit more loose. You don't want to actually have like a tourniquet of tight clothing around the waist or anywhere around the legs. If you wear looser clothing, it's going to be far more effective in letting the lymph system flow. Sometimes with compression stockings, which are very helpful, you have to make sure, so if the waistband is around here, at the demarcation of where the lymph fluid moves, brilliant. But if it's too low, that's not going to help. Also, you don't want to get a tourniquet effect around the ankle. So wearing super tight socks can also keep the feet from letting the lymph system flow back up into the groin so that it can drain. Okay, now I'm going to show you one more area that is really helpful in draining this area. Okay, so this is such a tricky area. A lot of the times you can have some firmness here, but there's that little area right here that can sag, and I'm going to explain why. So this, if you know how I said this is a demarcation of how the lymph flows, we actually call that a watershed. Now we actually have another watershed back here, and that watershed is in the shape of an upside down U, okay? So that upside down U, everything outside of that has to come around and drain in the groin. Everything on the inside has to drain this way into our groin area, which is a different lymph node. I'm going to show you that one. That one, if you put your leg up on a stool or something, it's like if you feel right here, there's a little triangle, there's a hole. That is another area where the lymph nodes are. And you gently push up like this 10 times. And what that does is after you've done that, you can now start opening up the lymph fluid and let this part of the body, especially that part that gets a bit saggy, it needs to drain into the groin. Now, I think one of the reasons this area gets so congested is because people just sit too much. And one of the things that I recommend, like, you know, whether you're sitting all day in front of the computer or you're on a stand-up desk, you're just too sedentary. I tell people, and I think that this is very useful for many different reasons, you need to maybe set a timer, and I want you to squat every hour. Do 10 squats. Okay, so what that does is it actually starts helping to move some stuff, fluid and things like that, but it gets you off those lymph nodes, so maybe we can get it to drain. Now, the superficial lymph does not, it's not affected by movement. It doesn't have a pump, but if you were to open up your lymph nodes every morning and every night, in the shower or before you get dressed, then you can actually start stimulating it. But I'm actually going to show you how to brush it. So if you've got time, you can start brushing this to also help stimulating it. But if you don't have time, you definitely will benefit from opening up your lymph nodes. If you have children, family members, just teaching them how to open up their lymph nodes is a great way to boost the immune system. Okay, so now we know how to open all of our lymph nodes. I'm now going to show you how to dry brush. So for dry brushing, you need a brush like this, something that has a little bit of a reach because some areas can be difficult. And what we're going to do is when you dry brush, you need to start in the area closest to the lymph node, and then you work your way backwards. So if I had swelling in my hand, okay, and sometimes we see that called lymphedema. It's especially more common if a woman has had breast cancer and had her lymph nodes removed, because now they don't drain well, right? The minute you take out a lymph node, you disrupt this whole system. So it's very easy to get swelling. So if those women who have had a mastectomy or had lymph nodes removed from their armpit or breast, they may notice swelling in their arms. So the way we dry brush is very specific. Like I said, it's not just to the heart. So after you've opened up the lymph nodes in the neck and the arm and the groin, when we dry brush, we're going to start closest to the lymph node, and we're going to brush in a way where we stretch the skin and release, okay? So it's very specific. And we start closer to the lymph node, and we work our way down to the ends of our fingers. So it looks like this. I'm going a little fast here. Now, the demarcation line is right down the arm. So a good way to remember that is if I was standing in the rain with my arms out like this, when the rain hits my arm, water flows this way and it will flow that way. And your lymph system does the same thing. So if I want to dry, because a lot of women complain about this part of their arm, if you want to drain this, use dry brush close to the lymph node, and you go backwards and stretch it a little bit, okay? And you're going to do that all the way down and then just finish. You're going to do the other arm. When you do the breast, because of the way I said it's broken up into quadrants, so up here you're going to try to brush towards your collarbone. But when you do the breast, okay, you're going to start again close to the lymph node. And what I want you to do is you're going to brush around the breast. So you're going to get that the 3/4 of the breast that drain into the armpit, but starting this way and working backwards, okay? And then for this quadrant, which actually also drains in the armpit, you're going to brush this way. So all this goes up. Just from where the belly button is, you're going to brush up. And from the back, start at the armpit, closer to the armpit, and you're going to brush towards the armpit, and that helps to get rid of any puffiness in the back area. Okay, so we've got the breast, we've done the arms, neck. What we're going to do now is the lower abdomen. So belly button here, everything below the belly button is going to go towards the groin. So again, if the lymph node drains from here, we're going to start closest to the lymph nodes, and we're going to work backwards. And we're going to cover this whole area around the hip. Remember that horseshoe, where the outside of the horseshoe drains here? We're going to bring that into the groin, okay? So you kind of stretch, release, stretch, release. It's a great way, believe it or not, to tone up your bum. Sometimes if I feel like I need to wear a bathing suit, I didn't do it today, but if I need to show some more skin and I don't want to look saggy, I'll dry brush. It's actually better than a workout. It really firms everything up. And now when I do the leg, I want to go ahead and open that one again. When I drain the leg, we start again close to the lymph node, and we're going to work our way up. And this is kind of at a diagonal. So I'm just going to speed it up a little bit, but basically you're repeating yourself, and then you're going to the next one 10 times, and again 10 times. And now when we get down to the legs, we're just going to just brush up the leg, okay? All right, now, done the legs, okay? And when we finish doing the legs, you can finish with a little milking around the ankles, behind the knee, and then the groin, just to flesh it out, okay? Now we're going to do the bum area, which is, like I said, the outer part, we're going to go to the groin. The inner part's a little more tricky. So because the inside of the horseshoe has to drain right in that area, you're going to take your brush after you've opened up this lymph node. Again, this one's right here in that triangle. And you're going to brush like this. So you stretch it and bring it in this way. So all the way till you get to the inside of that triangle, you're going to bring that fluid into that groin area. And then after you've done that, you want to again flush it out, finish it off. And then just one more time, go ahead and open up your lymph nodes and just flush everything out. Now, I know that when I can probably do my whole body in about 15 minutes. When you first start out, it does take time, bear with me. It's good to drink a lot of water. Sometimes you might notice that after you've drained your lymph nodes, that your urine might look different, it might smell different. If you've really got a lot of congestion, I encourage you to find a professional. Usually they tend to be like me, a physical therapist or a physiotherapist trained in proper lymphatic drainage. But if you don't have access to that, by all means, start doing what I've taught you. It's a brilliant way to really help boost your immune system.